The cold was a sharpened blade slicing into David's exposed skin, but it was nothing compared to the raw, excruciating pain radiating from his left leg, now reduced to something shapeless and wet. He lay face down, his face buried in frozen earth and pine mud, and the only thing he could register beyond his stifled groans was the overpowering smell of fresh blood, mixing with the hot, heavy breath hovering just above the back of his neck. It was a breath that smelled of soil, fish, and a primordial ferocity that needed no justification. The attack had been far too fast for David's years of training as a professional tracker. A brown and gray blur burst from the dense tangle of fir trees, moving with an impossible speed for an animal of such massive size. The 12-gauge shotgun, his trusted companion, lay several meters away, useless in the thin layer of snow that had only just begun to fall. The bear, a massive male with dark brown fur mottled with old scars, was not interested in killing him quickly. That much David knew from experience. If this were a clean kill, his neck would already be broken or his spine severed. Instead, the bear had clamped down with terrifying force on his thigh and calf, shredding muscle and likely shattering bone, before briefly releasing him, only to seize him again by the back of his waxed canvas jacket. It was at that moment, at the peak of terror, that David felt the first stab of a horrifying realization. The bear wasn't eating him. It was dragging him. The monumental weight of the animal and the relentless strength with which it pulled David by his jacket carved an ugly, dark trail through the snow. David felt every jolt, every sharp stone, every dry branch scraping against his already shattered body. His head flailed uncontrollably. He couldn't scream. Pain and shock had stolen his voice, reducing it to guttural sounds. He saw the world sideways, tree trunks flashing past, a nearly black-blue sky promising more snow, and the forest growing denser, darker, as they moved forward. This was not the behavior of a predator defending territory, nor even one hunting prey. A hungry bear would have finished the job where it stood and begun feeding, or at the very least dragged the body to a safer place to eat. This bear was carrying him with a strange, urgent purpose. But where? David knew he was deep in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, in the most isolated region of the national park, where the chance of another human finding him before the coming storm buried everything was zero. He and his partner Sam had separated earlier, agreeing to meet at the observation point by late afternoon. David had veered off to track what appeared to be a large deer, only to encounter something far larger and deadlier. The conflict raging inside David was as violent as the physical pain. He should already be dead. If the bear wanted meat, why keep him alive, dragging him hundreds of meters across unforgiving terrain? The animal seemed to be heading toward a rocky area, a granite outcrop David recognized as a section of the mountain riddled with small grottos and shallow caves, common bear dens during hibernation, or for mothers with cubs. The possibility of being dragged into a den to be stored as fresh meat, or worse, turned into a living toy for hungry cubs, sent a new wave of icy terror through him. He tried to fight back, but even the smallest movement sent searing pain through his body, making him vomit bile and remnants of breakfast. The bear stopped, only long enough to adjust its grip on the jacket, then continued on. With every step, David felt moisture pooling beneath him. Not just cold sweat, but his own blood soaking into the snow. The journey felt endless, but eventually daylight began to fade, replaced by a damp, suffocating darkness. The air grew colder yet strangely still, and the heavy footsteps of the bear echoed, reverberating. They had arrived. The grizzly dragged David through the narrow, jagged mouth of a cave. David couldn't see anything, but he felt the change in acoustics and the overwhelming stench of wet earth and animal waste. The air inside was heavy, but mercifully shielded from the mountain wind. David's body was released onto the rough cave floor with a dull thud, granting him the first moment of relief from the constant pressure. He inhaled deeply, trying to assess the darkness and his situation. He was completely unarmed, immobilized, and trapped underground with a bear. Fear and despair surged anew. He struggled to roll onto his side, groaning as his shattered leg moved. His goal was simple: reach anything, any sharp stone to defend himself before the bear decided to finish what it started. Then the pattern broke, so abruptly and illogically that David thought blood loss had driven him into delirium. The grizzly, which should have been roaring, snapping, attacking, made a sound. Not a roar, but a low, deep rumble, almost a dissatisfied grunt. It didn't sound like rage. It sounded like consideration. David forced his eyes open, adjusting to the dim light. The faint glow from the cave entrance, now a distant portal to an unreachable world, barely illuminated the massive silhouette of the bear, less than 3 meters away. David braced himself for the final attack. It didn't come. Instead, the bear turned away and slowly walked toward the cave entrance. David heard the wet rhythm of its breathing and the scrape of claws against stone. Then the bear turned and lay down, blocking nearly the entire opening with its colossal body. It was as if the bear was guarding him. David stared in disbelief as the animal settled in, its body forming a living barrier against the cutting night wind howling outside. The cave, damp as it was, began to retain warmth, partly from David's body, but mostly from the immense heat radiating from the bear. Time dragged on in a disturbing silence, broken only by the storm outside and the bear's subtle shifts. David was too confused to feel fear for a moment. If the bear wanted him dead, he would be. If it wanted to eat him, the meal was ready. He tried to whisper, but his throat was dry and ruined. "Why?" he croaked, knowing the question was meaningless. The bear responded by lifting its massive head. In the dim light, David caught the glint of deep, dark eyes. The bear made that low rumble again, and a chill ran through David's spine. There was something disturbingly protective in its posture. Reality crashed back in. He was gravely injured, trapped in a predator's den with no escape. The bear might simply be waiting, for hunger, for weakness, for death. Medical attention was critical. His pulse was weak and rapid. Without treatment, he would die within hours, of shock or infection. Surviving the night was the only goal, and with renewed terror mixed with disbelief, David realized that his only protection from the lethal cold was the very creature that had nearly killed him. The bear seemed to notice his agitation. It raised its head again, and then did something that made David's heart stutter. The bear extended its snout, not aggressively, not baring teeth. It gently touched David's chest, an uninjured area, not a shove. Not a test bite, a touch. David froze, waiting for the moment patience would snap, but the bear only inhaled deeply, then withdrew. David, drifting between shock and unconsciousness, saw the bear lift one massive paw and, astonishingly gently, push a bundle of dry moss and pine needles from the corner of the cave toward him. A crude nest, insulation from the stone floor. David, who had spent half his life studying wildlife behavior, was witnessing something science would deem impossible. An adult grizzly in peak feeding season before hibernation was not only sparing its prey, but offering warmth and protection. David coughed, trying to swallow the knot of terror and disbelief in his throat. Pain dragged him toward darkness, but the need to understand anchored him. His leg throbbed violently. He groaned aloud. The bear shifted. The ground trembled. Instead of attacking, it rumbled softly and moved closer, positioning its massive, warm back against David's body, a living radiator. The smell was overpowering. The heat was salvation. Exhausted, mortally wounded, and utterly confused, David realized that, for reasons beyond human understanding, he was now under the care of his attacker. He was not prey. He was a burden the bear had chosen to carry. The shock of that realization crushed what little strength he had left. He passed out, his last conscious image the bear's snout pushing the insulating moss closer. Outside, the snowstorm intensified. Sam, David's partner, had already noticed his prolonged absence and was alerting search and rescue. They would arrive in the morning. What they would find, when they finally tracked David to that isolated cave, would be the most shocking, counterintuitive scene of their careers. A scene that would rewrite the rules of survival and predation. And it was being guarded at that very moment by the most unlikely protector of all.